This is the Midlife Mischief Club podcast with John and Alvin.
We are launching into the podcast that we talked about at Burning Man, and we're glad to have guest James Malcolm here. And to put some context around this, our guest here, James, wears many hats. He lives in New Zealand. He's a father of a 2-year-old. He's got an adorable young wife that I got to hang out with all you guys for 6 days and 6 nights in the Nevada desert. What else can you tell us, just so we know about who you are before we launch into the details?
Okay, so I am mid-30s. I am self-employed. I've been self-employed since I was like 21. Probably unemployable. That's probably why I've become self-employed. Went to uni for a year, failed miserably, met my best friends, and kind of, my life was kind of mapped out for me to become like a 6th-generation cropping farmer on the family farm. And I was just like, my parents ended up selling the farm, luckily, and it broke the family curse. And then I kind of stumbled upon beekeeping and fell in love with it. And like I said, I've become self-employed at like 21, and I'm now 36. Yeah, I've had a cool relationship with Rach for 5 years, and definitely pushed the boundaries on what a relationship stands for. So, and then since then, we've got a 2-year-old child, and her name's Manuka. And we could just pack her around with us. Like we do all sorts of cool trips overseas, around New Zealand, and have like a pretty funky life where we work hard in the season, spring and summer in New Zealand, and then always looking for some sort of adventure and shenanigans wherever,
Seems like you have a lot of adventures you go on, and a lot of hobbies and things that you like to do with you and your family. Going to Burning Man where you met Alvin. Can you guys describe a little bit about that experience of what that was like?
I heard that it felt like you'd be dropped on the moon, and that's what it felt like when we got there. There was a whiteout that lasted about 20 hours, and it's not a joke. You had to shelter in place. You had dust even in your teeth. And then we had the best weather ever. And so you go from kind of hellish conditions to building a camp, and became like best friends with James in about, one day. To then in the middle of the night, when you launch out in these lit up bikes to the best parties of your life, you hit one, and then someone pulls you by the arm and goes, "All right, we've been here long enough. It's been 30 minutes. We're going to go to the next best party of our lives."
Wow. I guess I'm used to extreme environments. Like for me, like my hobbies are like hiking, hunting, the outdoors. I work in the mountains, like harvesting honey with bees and whatnot. And so I'm used to being in a harsh environment. So that wasn't too much of a shock for me. And probably what I did think is that it's way more normal at Burning Man. It's out the gate and you can't explain it. But there's a lot of normality in it. Everyone thinks it's like Instagram models and nudity and whatever else. It is that. But there's everyone else that's just sort of participating in every different format. So it's like, and just the scale of it, like the scale of it blew my mind, and that it doesn't sleep for 8 days, like it's 24 hours. It's relentless. It gets under your skin. And, the part that cracks me up is that I took a 2-year-old there, and the 2-year-old had more fun than I did, because like everything is like amazing. Like the default world for her is boring. She's like, holy shit, I want to go back there.
Wow.
Me and Alvin are biking around, looking around, like, wow. And this child is just, everything is just stimulation overload. And I think, I don't know, like for me, it's something that I'll partake in every couple of years, probably for the rest of my life. Like Alvin probably has mixed feelings about it, because I'm used to that harsh environment. So I'm like, whatever.
Right.
I'm good for it. But like,
I was so impressed by James building the camp, and like with just endless energy. But to your point that James was making, one of my takeaways, John, is that there's a sense of community that is like almost like never before. I mean, strangers who hug you, and no cars to hide behind, no houses to hide behind.
No cell phones to hide behind, no emails to hide behind, no nothing. There isn't a VIP ticket to Burning Man. There's like a ticket for everyone, and it's like cutting bullshit. So it's like I came away from there like a little bit confused, and probably took me. It's probably taken me 2 months to really reflect on it, to be like, that was good.
Yeah.
And to think about the interaction. So this is the part that turned me on the most, because this is what I seek and look for. Is I look for stimulating, intelligent conversation. So everywhere you went, there was intelligent conversation. Like just intelligent people, like the banter, the stories, the laughs, the humor, the art. Everything about the place is intelligent. Like everyone's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Totally. That's one thing about it. I was going to say, it just filters out the a lot of people who I don't know. You end up with the most extreme people.
Yep. Yep. Oh, so we borrowed this old camper van off some friends from Alberta, Canada, and they're Kiwi friends of mine that live like 10 minutes down the road, and they had this camper van based in Alberta. And I borrowed it once before. Last time I borrowed it, Rach was pregnant, and we did a 13,000-kilometer road trip down through the US.
Wow.
And ended up down in like where we go. We went down through the Rockies. This is the previous mission. So down through the Rockies to Denver. We went across the Midwest to Nashville, and then we went through New Orleans, through Texas, New Mexico, up to Vegas, and then back up through Nevada, and then Oregon, Washington, and back into Alberta. But so Rita is a bit of an old dog and doesn't have AC unless you're plugged into power at night. And our steering's just broken on this most recent trip, so now it doesn't have power steering. And I bought a generator for it, so we're actually pretty sweet. But anyway, that first mission, Rach was like 3 months pregnant, and she had really bad morning sickness. And this trip was kind of designed like 8 weeks. It was designed to have a bunch of friends join us for 2 and 3 weeks stints, and a bit of a boozy sort of trip with our mates. Rach obviously pregnant, 45 degrees for 3 weeks in a row. It was a heat wave.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so the humidity kicked in Nashville, and then it just the whole way around the bottom, down through New Orleans and around through to Texas. And it wasn't until we got back up to Oregon that it actually the temperature cooled off. But she wanted to stab me, like it was bad. And we were like on the booze every night, freaking having fun, like a boozy boys trip with my pregnant wife. And so we'd get to these RV parks at night or in the afternoons, we'd plug in the power, and it would take like an hour to cool the wagon down just because everything was so hot. And we're like the oldest vehicle on the motorway, with the windows down, and we're just sitting there like half naked, like on fan base. And people were just looking at us like, who are these rednecks? Like Alberta number plate, down in, way down south. Anyway, that's the first trip of Rita. And then we sign up again because we're that freaking stupid. But then once we got to Boom, man, Rita was a godsend, wasn't they, Alvin? Like, we all took refuge in it. Like, we made coffees when there wasn't coffee set up. We freaking cooked breakfasts. We hung out in the dust storm in there.
It was my refuge from my messed up tent life.
Yeah. And just put, it was pretty severe. Like, that first couple of days when we were at Burning Man, like, I think the best stuff storm, it didn't last for a long time, but the best stuff storm, there would have been probably 2 meters of visibility. And it's whipping through there pretty quick. I'd heard stories that the worst I'd ever seen it was you couldn't see your hand in front of you. So it's like it's a pretty arid environment. Hey,
Sure.
and it's just stuck in the life in here. So hey, Rita has done us well, and I hit up Rex today and I said, are we good for another Rita mission? And she's like, I think we're done with Rita, but I disagree with her. I think Rita's got Burning Man in her one more without a child, but I will send her in for some preventative maintenance before we
there you go. Maybe a tune up and
typical Burning Man in an 89 E350 old Ford camper, and like just strapping everything to it and heading to the desert. I do a lot of trips, but none of them are glamorous. So I don't need glamour in my life.
Right.
I need longevity. So it's like, hey, I want to go away for longer, but I can just do it on the cheap. And it's not that I'm backpacking. Still I'm lapsing it up at like nice restaurants and stuff, but it's like, borrowing bits and pieces off our mates and just making shit work. Like, that's kind of who I am, like, the bush mechanic, that like having a laugh.
Well, it's great to be able to know enough to fix something on the fly, because when you're going through the Rockies or wherever, there might not be a service station or anything for miles and miles. So you could have that could have been a trip ender right there.
Oh, the worst part, that first trip, I forgot this detail, right? So we were driving up through Nevada on that first trip when Rach was pregnant, and we were going through Death Valley, and it started overheating, and we were in roadworks, and it was like 45 degrees, and that's just like that. And I had to pull over the side in this roadworks, and we limped to the next town. And then I rang a friend in New Zealand, a mechanic, and he got some advice off him. And anyway, so I thought, hey, well, he told me what's going on. He said the water pump's crapping out. And so then we looked up, and there was a radiator shop in Bishop, California. And so we looked there through the night once it was cold. And I ended up having to use the grey water underneath the shaft, the grey water tank, to fill up the radiator. And we lived there in like 15-minute increments, pretty much for about an hour or hour's drive. It took the whole night to get there.
Right.
And then we parked up at this radiator shop, and Jose, this Mexican dude, he was an absolute legend. So we parked up there, pregnant wife, plugged into his power, using his 18. And he said to me, like, I was leaking on the side of the hood, and he's working on it. We were there for about 3 days, and he said to me, if you ask me any questions, I'll charge you double. And I didn't ask any questions at all. I just leant there, and I could see him like frustrated, looking for tools and stuff. And he'd ask me little comments and stuff. And
sure.
And then I knew what tools he was looking for, so I'd pass him the tool. And then he warmed to like me to the point where we drank beers every night. And he's kids my age, like he was a cool guy. And
that's great.
We got to the end of that Friday afternoon. I said, I'll go to the bank, I'll give you cash, pay the bill, and I asked him, how much is it? And he said, $500. And I just said, man, there's $500 worth of parts here. And I just said, you're ripping yourself off. So I went to the bank and got some cash out, and I gave him $900. And
wow.
I was just like it just, it's $500 worth of parts. Yeah.
So he was kind of doing you a solid, but
he was being a legend. And he just didn't care. He didn't need much. Like,
right.
So, when you meet people like that are super humble and are willing to help you, that don't have much themselves, and actually don't care, like, that's a cool feeling. And you're like, nah, man, like, you're a good person. And I'm like, I know what it should cost. Even if you do it for $900, it's still probably half of what it should cost.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that is your attitude. You were right there with them throughout, and not coming in entitled, like, fix my truck, I'll be in the hotel, with the AC cranked. You were right there with him, befriending him, helping him out. I think that really means a lot,
Well, and I guess it's about being unassuming as well. Like, like I run a pretty good business, and I'm just chipping away doing me. But it's like, he probably thought I was this broke backpacker with 4 wives in the back there, and it's like, which is cool, because it's like, it doesn't actually matter. Like, drop your ego, like, and just be real. We live in a tiny house down the end of the paddock, like where our business and stuff is based. So the bee business is based at one end, and then at one end of the block, and then we're down the other end. And Rachel's got a set up down there for horses, and she's an interesting woman, because she's like super relaxed, but then she's got like this fierceness in her as well. Like, she trains animals for a living. Like, she starts them. Like, she's the first person to ride these horses, and the connection she has with them, and the feeling and stuff like that. Like, it's a pretty special talent, and just a cool woman, like, that, understands it. The thing, works with her hands. Like, she's cool. She's a cool woman, and like, she's pretty soft on a soul as well. Like, you've met her, Alvin. Like, she's kick ass.
She's so amazing. She's a charmer. So let me hear where you live in New Zealand, because I don't know anything about the countryside. I've seen great video of where you are. You've got a big vegetable garden, and then a view of horses and hillsides. Can you tell us about where you live?
Yeah, so we live in the centre of the South Island. So there's the North and South Island make up New Zealand, plus a bunch of small islands, but two main islands, and we're in the centre of the South Island. And the closest city to us is called Christchurch, and we're 45 minutes towards the mountains from Christchurch. So we're right on the edge of some beautiful mountains, awesome walking trails, beautiful, clean, pristine rivers. The beach is like 30 minutes away. Wineries are like 30 minutes away. Like, it's actually quite a cool area where we live. The only thing I could probably fault about New Zealand is its weather. So, we get some nice weather in the summer, but it's like you could have like 4 seasons in one day just because it's a little island nation, like surrounded by water. It just gets smoked by different weather systems. And versus you guys being in big continents or whatever, like, so, New Zealand is beautiful because of its harshness. So, mountainous terrain, lush forests, green rolling hills, but because it's always getting some sort of adverse weather system smacking into it.
I love how you can live off the land. I mean, you got a big vegetable garden, and then you mentioned that you can go down the road and fish for yourself. Can you tell me a little more?
All right. So, like some of my hobbies, like I'm into vegetable gardening. Like for me, vegetable gardening is therapy. My granddad was a keen vegetable gardener. My grandparents retired young. My parents were super busy, so I spent heaps of time with them. So my grandparents were into fishing and hunting and living off the land, and they retired at 50. So they had plenty of time on their hand, and they had a massive veggie garden. So I guess I was brought up with that. My dad was an organic cropping farmer, so that has been installed in me. That living off the land concept. So I have a big veggie garden. I'd say that we probably don't buy any vegetables for about 8 months of the year. We can purely live off this veggie garden for 8 months of the year. 4 months we're either overseas or buying from the store or whatever. So that for me, my vegetable garden is my therapy. So I don't have TV, and I go in there at night, just after dinner, and I pour some weeds and I plant some stuff, and it's pretty basic, but there's some fundamentals that you've got to understand, like how to look after the soil and compost and things like that. I'm into fishing and diving, so when I'm fishing, I'm collecting seaweed and keeping my fish bodies and stuff like that, and I bury them in my garden, and I make them into my compost, and I make them up in buckets and let them rot away. So it's it's pretty awesome. Like,
I think a lot of people don't think about that in terms of how to add more nutrient-rich products to their garden. They think of what bottle can I spray on it or what can I add to it, but really going with compost or creating your own. And so you're almost into like a no waste kind of lifestyle, which is just fantastic.
And I guess it's probably interesting that I've done this as a younger person, because it's like being installed in me. And like I said, I've got some cool mates and mentors and stuff that fully live off the land, and they own nothing, but they're like the richest people I know. Live in little bush shacks and stuff, out in coastal communities in the far north of New Zealand, and I've learned some cool stuff off them, and just cool appreciation. And everything's treasure. So it's for us, we have this big wood fire outside our house on the deck, and we I say to my friends when they're standing around drinking beers and stuff, we barbecue with wood, and we stand around the fire cooking on it and stuff like that. And I say to my mates, just don't put any rubbish in there, because in that fire, I'll chuck meat bones and fish shells and stuff in there after we've cooked in them. But then I use the ash from that fire to use that as my potash on my veggie garden. So
nice.
There's a whole
the cycle of life. That's so cool.
Yeah. So you're keeping your fish bodies, you're picking up bits of seaweed for mulching your garden, and the potash and stuff from your fire. Just everything. I'm just quite conscientious of my footprint, and I'm not saying I still believe in chemicals, but I'm minimize them. Don't only use them when you really got a problem. Don't kill and treat and spray everything. It's you've got to have the tools in the toolbox if you've got a problem. But
exactly,
try and just keep it as simple and basic as possible. It's just fundamental policies and just being like, hey, this is the nutrients and stuff that everything needs.
Yeah.
It's old school. Like, I'm not saying that I use my own human waste on my veggie garden, but definitely use horse shit. But it's all just nutrients.
Right. And again, you've got some because you've got the horses, and so why not use it?
Yeah.
James, can you talk a little bit about the beekeeping? That's another thing that I would love to learn more about.
I currently run 5,500 beehives, and we've got a full-time team of 15. We've got 2 full-time queen breeders, like 10 beekeepers, and then some office staff and some other business.
Holy cow.
We produce roughly about 300 ton honey. So we're Manuka Honey specialists. So that's what we do. It's Manuka Honey. And we pretty much, work with the landowners and whatnot that own the properties that we're producing on, share the profits for them, and then get it to a barrel, and then we sell it to packers and exporters.
Wow.
That's what we do. So I started that from nothing. I started with 10 beehives when I was 18 and have built up like not a bad little business. I love it. It frustrates me because I'm farming the weather and I live in New Zealand, but
sure,
it's there's a lot of moving parts pretty much. So, and you've got to be pretty nimble. So it's like this decision making. So like last weekend we had 100 millimeters of rain. Before that, things were pretty dry, and I'm thinking, okay, sweet. Well, that's changed this. This is our new game plan. So we're pretty fluid to how the plan works. We make a game plan of what we're up to for the year, but then so that's what we do.
You export to tell me what countries.
So I mean, we use a lot of freight forwarders, but we'll go through the middleman. But I mean, direct. We do stuff in the US, Australia, and into Europe, and then through the main other companies and stuff we deal with, our honey goes to China, Europe, UK, Japan, other parts of Asia. So pretty much it's going everywhere.
You've got me putting honey in my coffee, James, since you mentioned that Burning Man.
Do you like your coffee? Wow.
Yeah, he's got me onto that.
It's actually really good, eh?
It's so good. And then before we met, my 17-year-old was a honey enthusiast because he somehow found out there's testosterone boost from honey.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like we all need to eat more.
I was going to say, where's my Manuka Honey? Excellent.
Yeah, it's like get the libido working.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Kiwi culture, James, and like the culture of travel. I mean, so and I figure it's similar to the Aussies too. Forgive the analogy, but it's just so outward looking, the culture, right? I mean, we talked about meeting up in Thailand next year, but could you just speak to what it means to be a Kiwi from a travel perspective?
I think because it's such a small country. Like at any time, so we only have a population of 5.5 million, and I think at any time there's up to 1 million Kiwis overseas. Like at any one time, so
wow.
that much of our population is abroad. And just because there's definitely negatives to New Zealand, as far as stereotypes and small poppy syndrome, and if you've got a big personality, it's like you're probably too big for this place, depending on where you are. Typical of a rural setting. There's definitely a lot of tourists and stuff here, so that brings more open-mindedness, and it's cool centers for that. But definitely as a Kiwi, there's a real urge to go have a look overseas and travel. So a lot of people, and it's kind of like the concept of an OE, that's a real Kiwi Aussie thing, to be you're going on an OE, so you finish uni or you finish school, and then you're I'm going to go travel and find myself and figure myself out for the next 3 or 4 years.
It's so good.
So
travel's education for life, man.
Fully agree. It makes you worldly. I love Aussie. Australia is a good place, and I have some really good friends over there. And it's pretty easy for us to travel over there. We need a passport, but we don't need a visa to go there, so we can go over there work, vice versa. And a lot of Kiwis and all these, just they're like a cousin, pretty much.
Yeah.
from Christchurch City to any of the cities on the east coast of Australia, so, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, they're pretty much like a 3-4 hour flight. So it's nothing.
Oh, okay. That's really close. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so it's not that far, and more often than not, it's cheaper to fly to Australia than it is to fly domestically in New Zealand. Yeah, so that's where we go holiday. You wouldn't go holiday in New Zealand as a Kiwi. You wouldn't go to the North Island. Should, but like it would be cheaper to go to Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's like you were telling me it's like another country going to northern New Zealand to see.
And New Zealand's a long, skinny country, and it's got its Alps that run the length of it, the length of the South Island particularly. And then the North Island has got 1/3 of the landmass, and it's got 2/3 of the population. And the South Island's got 2/3 of the landmass, 1/3 of the population.
I see.
And that's generally because it's colder down here. People have moved up there because it's like more tropical, especially in the northern half of the North Island. Like it's a nice climate, it's a bit more balmy, and people gravitate towards that. And there's bigger centres up there. Our biggest city is Auckland, the top of the North Island. But the North Island is a beautiful place, and it's interesting. Like New Zealand, it's the same as the US. Like here the landscape changes every 3 years. Whereas in the US, it takes a couple of days for the landscape to change. So, but it's the same concept of that changing landscape, but it's just compressed into a tiny small area. But it's very similar, like if you thought about any part of the west coast of the US, from top to bottom, and you'd say, hey, that's kind of the same as New Zealand, but just compressed it. Yeah, like I probably can't wait to retire for myself, and obviously I've got a lot of living to do between now and then, but I can't wait to retire so that I can do my hobbies full time. That's because I've got so many hobbies. Like I'm into diving, fishing, hunting. I started enjoying golf.
Oh wow!
I like traveling. I like veggie gardening. And like traveling and seeing cool shit and being stimulated, and just I like doing new things. As a Kiwi, we're all into food, and we're surrounded by water, so we're surrounded by probably some of the best seafood in the world, which is still plentiful. Like it's like there's regulations and stuff on how much you can take, but it's like it's starting to get deteriorated just because of human impact. Like it's recreation and commercial, but like we do a lot of power diving, which is abalone, lobster, scallops, oysters, other creatures and stuff that people eat from the water, lots of mussels, but particularly like crayfish and lobster. We that's the main thing we dive for, and abalone. So and it's kind of like you'll team up with a mate and just be like, oh, the sea's flat, such a place, and it's like, well, I'll meet you here, and we'll go for a dive, and collecting food. That's just part of our life. So instead of buying that stuff from the store, it would be cheaper to buy it from the store, but
sure,
because the money you spend on your equipment and driving to that spot, but that's just part of the whole part of being Kiwi and the outdoors and a way of life, pretty much.
It's like fishing, sometimes you don't catch anything, sometimes you do, but it's the fishing that's the point.
Yeah, and so earlier this year, before I went to the US, I went to the Isle of Man, and I went to the Isle of Man TT race. So that's that motorbike race, that famous road bike race where they race around that island.
Yeah.
And I was hosted by a honey buyer, and that's why I went there. The honey buyer is based there, and it was a bucket list thing, and I kind of have a bucket list of stuff that I'm starting to tick off now. I don't want to wait until later. I'm like, righto, start ticking the stuff off, some real cool adventures, and that was one of them. So to go to the Isle of Man TT, and this was the first year in 170 years that no one's died at the Isle of Man.
Wow!
So there's only been 2 years. Sorry, there's only 2 years in 170 years that no one's died. So this was one of them, and I guess just actually living and taking stuff off. I've been invited to a desert rally this next winter, so New Zealand winter, so May, June. And it's in Australia, and it's called the Fig Rally, and it's kind of like the Dakar, but it's like in Australia. And So there's a mate of mine from New Zealand, and he's down there to doing an endurance motorbike race. And a couple of mates of me said, "Oh, well, one of the helicopter pilots." So we said, "Well, let's charter a helicopter and we'll pitch in together, and we'll come and be this guy's support crew and just drink beers and have fun." So just random hobbies and interests that I'm like, that interests me. I want to have a look at that. And beyond beekeeping, I would like to, I don't know what I want to do, but I would like to do a bunch of stuff, like be based in the US. I'd like to go do a summer in Antarctica, just a bunch of fulfilling things. And generally in my adventures, like I'll hear about some sort of mischief that happens at an event, so they'll be like, "Oh, there's the event," and then they'll be like, "Oh, I hear there's this fucking wild party and there's this naughty woman and there's all this debauchery that goes on," and I'm like, I want to see that. And luckily I've got a cool partner that's like, let's go have a look at that, or go have fun. Just don't tell me about
it. It's such a great philosophy of life. You guys just say yes and then figure it out later how the heck you're going to make it happen.
and more recently in our relationship, there's some stuff that happened in the past. It's like, that was learning, but it's like now we kind of have an attitude where it's like, well, you're allowed to do whatever you want, and then we'll have the conversation afterwards. If you decide to do that, and it's like, we'll figure it out, and then just be like, well, you're allowed to have a full life and live and make choices that sometimes are marginal, but it's like, we'll figure it out.
Wow. That's part of what impressed me about meeting you. Like your energy really comes across like right away. James, like, is magnetic, and it wasn't just Rita.
Or the coffee.
Yeah. James was holding a cup of coffee and a beer in each hand. So that's how we were rolling. What are you doing to stay fit, my friend? You're fit.
Yeah, I have been maintaining some sort of fitness. Like, for me, because we live beside the mountains and we've got 2 dogs, those dogs need exercise. So they have the roam of they've got 5 acres where they've got like electric shock collars with a boundary fence, and they've got 5 acres where they can just roam. And,
nice.
All day. We don't even lock them up when we go after the weekend. They just hang out at home and sort of watch the property. And so we spend a bit of time in the mountains, walking and running the dogs. And those trails are like 10 minutes from my house. The beach is pretty close, so I like running at the beach and just live a pretty active life. So I like the gym. I've got a real soft spot for the sauna. I've got myself a smoothie right handed. I've had for breakfast. I don't know. That's just kind of how I live. Like, you can put a bit of negatives in there, but you've got everything else has to be healthy.
Hey, speaking of being active and not healthy, tell us a little bit about your bull riding days.
Okay, so back in the day when I used to rodeo, so I rodeoed from 17 to about 23, and the only reason I stopped is because the bee thing started getting quite serious, and with bee business, and realities of responsibility and self-employment, which I probably experienced too young. Like, in hindsight, I should have just maximized my 20s and been irresponsible and just lived it up and had fun. To let the world chew me up, but whatever. So I rodeoed for that stint, 6 years, riding bulls and bareback horses.
Wow.
We did that in New Zealand, and then in the New Zealand winter, I would go to Canada, to Alberta, and rodeo over there for their summer. So that's what I did for 6 years, and I wasn't great at it. Like, a bunch of my friends were better at it than me, but I loved it. And I probably rode. I probably got on like 500 bulls and maybe 50 bareback horses. So not like I didn't do bugger all on the bareback stuff. I was just getting into it, but the bareback scared the shit out of me that much that it made my bull riding that much better, because I wasn't scared of bulls after riding bareback horses. I look back on it, I can run bareback now. Some of the dumbest things I've ever done. but I still loved it. And bull riding, yeah, that's just about like I still think about bull riding now and just think, feel like, yeah, if someone dared me to, or we're drunk, something, I'd probably get on.
Oh, that's 6 seconds away from a broken hip, and oh boy, ouch.
I'm
I
impressed.
hope you, yeah, I'm very impressed. I hope you got out of that without any serious injuries.
Uh, Probably the worst one. I honestly was very lucky compared to a lot of my friends. Like my friend had some horrific injuries. I had a lot of like muscle injuries, and I'm sure I'll pay for it later on in life. But the worst one is I fractured my skull just here, kicked in the head, like hung up under a bull and just dragged around underneath it. And I was pretty young at the time. I was just learning, and I wasn't wearing a helmet then. So after that, my mum pretty much was like, "You gotta carry on doing this. You gotta wear a helmet." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So I, started wearing like an ice hockey style helmet. But yeah, the bull kicked up my face, and the hoof went under my eyelid, split my eyelid right through to my eyebrow, fractured my eyebrow, my eye socket, and I spent a week in hospital. And even when I blinked, the inside half of my eyelid worked and the outside half didn't. So they did a pretty bloody good job of patching me up, and my eye being pretty functional. When I'm a bit tired, you that hangs down lower, but whatever. So hey, that's my worst injury. Like that's a few broken fingers and things like that. But
Sure.
I had mates that had double collapsed lungs and just horrific things. Like they should be dead. Like and they survived. Like so
Yeah.
Rodeoing was a cool thing when I was younger, but like it's dumb. Like
He-
it just like I'll pay for it when I'm older, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
You horseback ride with Rachel?
Yeah, I do. So there was a period there, it hasn't happened for a while, where I was the guinea pig that got on her horses that she just started. So she'd break them in, and then I'd be the first non-horse trainer to get on them. So we'd take them to the beach and ride them out in the open. And the beach is pretty good because like there's like nice firm sand by the shore, and then you come up the beach a little bit and it's a bit softer. So you're riding along by the shore, and then you can like turn them out into the deep sand when they start getting a bit western on you. To take the buck out of them or slow them down or get your walk control.
So is it dangerous?
Me and Rach had a lot of fun.
James, is it dangerous what she does? If she's breaking horses, is she getting on wild horses like you?
Like that. She does a lot of groundwork. So she does a lot of groundwork on the ground before she'll get on them. So making the horse trust her and sussing it out and trying different things so that the horse is desensitized to anything that might stress it out. Like she could be riding it and it sees something and freaks out at it. Or something blowing in the wind, like a big tarp or something might be flapping. So she wants to desensitize them so that nothing will spook them, or within reason. It's still a young horse, still needs a lot of more miles and stuff on it. But she, definitely her job's dangerous. Like, she's a cowgirl, like she's doing it. But probably the worst part is that she's at home alone doing it. She's not far from where we're based. Like she's only 500 meters away. But she's at home by herself, get on these horses. It's not like there's two or three of them there to sort of help each other out. Like she's doing it by herself. So I don't know, I encourage her to wear a helmet as much as possible, like when she's getting on young ones, but she doesn't. She's a cowgirl. She's been bucked off a few times, and she's got there's that in there, but stuff like both me and her are probably going to be quite geriatric when we're older. So that's just life, right? Like play silly games and win silly prizes.
Is there anywhere in the States that you gravitate towards, that you really enjoy, that speaks to you at all?
Probably for my hobbies and what I'm into, other than not being close to the ocean. Like I really love Washington. That really resonates with me. Just because I'm like a cowboy at heart. I'm pretty much a right-wing hippie is what I am. I care about the environment, but I believe in making money. So I just I'm torn. I'm a walking contradiction, and it frustrates the shit out of me. But I love Washington and Oregon. And probably just the attitude of the people, and I probably need that kind of rainfall for things to be growing and plentiful in my headspace, and I can't handle living in the desert for too long. But
Yeah, it is beautiful up there.
I do believe that I will end up in the US at some point, and I don't know if it's living on his couch or on my own momentum. We'll wait and see. Like I do want to end up over there. I'm probably I need a bit more stimulation than what New Zealand's giving me at the moment.
Gotcha.
Just a new challenge.
Yeah.
A bigger pond for the
Yeah.
fish. You know.
You're a worldly soul. Have you seen Seattle yet, James?
No, I haven't. There's one. I haven't done that corner. So I've been to Vancouver. I've been to Vancouver Island, but I haven't done up in that corner there.
I just want to put it out there. My oldest friend, like in the world, has a house on Bainbridge Island, and we've got open invitation all the time.
And are they legends?
Oh, I've lived with him 4 times, James.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's like we just go. We want to go. We try to go large every single time.
Yeah. And that's the problem is that I look forward to when I come and see it, and I guess I look forward to like the chill bit as well as the wild fucking you put an eye on me and show me what happens. But I look forward to the hanging out on the couch, just yarning, the hangover bit, laughing at each other, and laughing about each other.
You've inspired. I have to tell James that you've inspired John here about living off the earth, off the land.
Definitely.
Well, I think it's like back to basics. Like we've lost connection with our food. Like I physically like eating with my hand. Because we've lost connection with our food. Like we eat things that look like food that are made from things that aren't food. Like it's like just back to basics. Like. Like my cholesterol, it's fine. I had it tested recently, but I'm a massive advocate for cast iron pans and butter. Like cook with butter. Like it tastes good. It's like you're just gonna make sure that you're healthy and all the other parts will like use that energy and don't just get fat. So like back to basics of like less is more. Like fresh ingredients and collecting it and probably the ceremony of either veggie gardening or fishing or hunting or preparing food and cooking for friends and putting some love into it and it feels good. It's very fulfilling. It's so basic.
It doesn't take that much effort just to be a little more cognizant of what you're putting in your body, what you're putting in your shopping cart, just to think about that. I agree with you. I think it's so important.
And I think for me as a food producer, I'm a beekeeper. So we're in the honey business. Like we're food producers. Like in the short amount of time that I have a career in beekeeping, which is still long enough, like it's 15 years, of commercial beekeeping, it's getting harder and harder to keep them healthy, to keep the bees healthy. Look, we use a lot of alternative varroa treatment. So we have a parasitic mite that feeds on the bees and use a lot of oxalic acids and stuff to treat that mite. But we're trying to kill an insect on an insect. And I'm watching global change happen. So in the 15 years, I'm like it wasn't that hard to keep these things healthy.
Wow.
15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's just it's getting tougher and tougher. So you take a step back and you're like, we do have a footprint and we are seeing changes, and it's this stuff's real, and it's affecting us, it's affecting my, what I do for a living.
Wow.
Well, if there's any way that we can support you in terms of pointing people towards your website or your farm, we'd love to do that.
Cool. So our business, we trade as Foothills Honey. So foothills.nz.
Well, this has been great. John, I appreciate your time as well. Super good. And James, we will introduce you to some of our previous podcasts.
Perfect. I'd appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Roger and out.
See you, bye.
Thanks for listening to the Midlife Mischief Club podcast. Please be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. You can find show notes, links to our socials, and see what else is cooking on our website at midlifemischiefclub.com.